Hi, everybody. This is English Teacher Island. This is a podcast by teachers and for teachers, and it's about things that teachers care about. And I'm Roy Black, and I'm here with Kevin Mulvihill and David E. Lyons, two friends and colleagues of mine. And we're here today to talk about conflict resolution. Gentlemen, when I thought about conflict resolution, I thought about two or three different facets of it. I think, there's classroom school conflicts and then there's personal conflicts. The school conflicts happen to be things like teacher to student conflicts or student to student conflicts or professional conflicts with the people that you work with. And then the other side would be the internal conflicts, how do I teach what I want to teach the way I want to teach it sort of conflicts. So um, I think probably the first one we ought to start with is just classroom and school conflicts because that's what most people think about when they talk about conflict resolution in the classroom. So um, is that okay with you guys if we proceed like that?
I like your plan.
Okay, cool. Let's talk about, first of all, let's talk about in-class student to student conflict and how we deal with that situation. When I talk with my student teachers, when I talk with my teacher assistants, my pre-teachers, they're constantly worried about what do I do if I have two students fighting in class, or what do I do if I have two kids that won't stop shouting at each other? So just kind of on a basic level, how do we deal with those things when they come up? When we have a conflict that might go from argument to something more dangerous. Kevin, how about you? You're the practicing high school teacher
Yeah,
in this group, so
yeah. I'm in the classroom. I guess it depends on um, what they're talking about, right? When it moves to personal, right? The idea that it becomes insulting, you're not talking about the material anymore, being personal. You're allowed to say things like, "Hey, let's be nice," or "Hey, that's not very kind," or are we talking about, I ask questions too, like, are we talking about something else? Honestly, it doesn't happen a lot in my classroom. I probably just jinxed myself. But the idea that, that you can say things like, we're not going to talk to each other like that in here. And usually that's good enough. I mean, that does really, for me, tend to work. Um, I will say that maybe 2 years ago, the freshmen would pick fights in front of my classroom. Don't have freshmen, knowing that I would stop it. Right. That I think I broke up 3 or 4 fights in 1 year because they're like, oh, this big old guy will stop us. Right.
I've kind of found that too, and maybe this is a gender thing, but it tends to be the guys or the boys that do that because they don't want to necessarily fight, but they don't want to lose face either. So
Yeah.
maybe if we fight in front of that big guy, he'll stop us from doing it, right?
Yeah.
I've seen girl fights where they were just, I mean, you better step back and let them get tired before you try to get in there, or you're going to catch a stray fist. But guys tend to do that circling and hurling of insults kind of thing where you can kind of get in there and do a little bit of intervention before that happens.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so again, when it really escalates, like, hey, I'm gonna kick your butt, like, yell and scream at guys, and generally speaking, they'll stop. Put myself in between them. I try and not always, but like a good basketball box out, sort of get big and low, and
Mhm.
hopefully that's always worked in the past. So hopefully it'll work now.
Yeah. Thank you. David, your thoughts here?
I don't. I never wanted to involve the principals. I thought if it's a problem in my own classroom, I want to take care of it myself, so that I can establish who I am. I'm thinking about the difference between the 23 and 24-year-old David and now. the 23 and 24-year-old David that did not understand the importance of building relationship and building community from day one. So I had those kinds of escalations, and and unlike you two gentlemen, I had no desire to get in between them.
I wouldn't say I had a desire to get in between them. I did
I
have the
had
ability.
the ability. Correction taken. I was going to avoid it at every cost, and so there would always be if two boys are going to fight, enough. Even when I'm 23, 24 years old, enough, and they would split for me. The girls, um, there was no way I was grabbing around a body in case I touched something I didn't need to touch.
Right.
And so with the girls, okay, it's the same as Kevin saying too, where there was the escalation went much faster and much,
Mhm.
I would say, nastier.
No.
Those ones there, um, there, I would look at a couple of the boys in the room, and they would separate them for me. And then
Hmm.
our job was to get one of the two out of the room always, so I could go and talk to that one in the hall. Nowadays, because I devote so much time there right from the beginning, and I'm clear about why I want them to talk to each other the way they do, and then model how we talk to each other. As the years have gone by, fewer and fewer issues. But those first years when I'm learning still who I am is when I had all of that.
So, are you talking about training behaviors, David, or are you just talking about holding them to the we take care of each other mantra of your classroom?
So we have the we take care of each other mantra, but then I have to help them. I'm training behaviors. I have to help them to understand what we take care of each other looks like, sounds like, and feels like. And we used to put on the board on that first day this idea that that we take care of each other. My other one used to be that before that one was everything we do in this classroom adds positive energy. Then
Well,
we would then, then we would put on the board looks like, sounds like, feels like, and have the students go up to the board so I could see how they moved in my class when I was still in the honeymoon period and see if it was going to be the one that was going to come and swat every God blessed kid as they went to the front of the room, or the one that thought they had to hit everyone's desk because we had all, and so that we could then, rather than saying, "Oh, for heaven's sake," which would be on my days like the week before Thanksgiving now when I'm all tired out. Would be okay. So now, does what that student just do look like we are taking care of each other? And as Kevin's highlighting too, that ask a series of questions.
so I guess this kind of goes into the teacher-student conflict because sometimes, David, when you make that correction, the student's not ready to do what you're asking them to do. Um, you know, how do we resolve those conflicts between teacher and student? What do we, David, you said you wanted to make sure you avoided involvement of administration as much as possible. I think that was something that I tried to do too. In fact, I told my administrator in charge of discipline, if you see one of my students, that means I don't feel like we can resolve it between me and the student. But what are some things that you have done? And David, we'll start with you and then move to Kevin. What are some things that you guys have done to to defuse situations with students, to de-escalate a situation before it gets to the point where you need an administrator involved?
Because I'm standing at the door watching them come in and I'm greeting each one of them, you can read the temperature on their faces often. And and when they're and so when you become in tune, and I'm even saying at 23, 24, 25 years old, that you're in tune with them. Okay, then um son or honey, come stand here for a moment and let's before we even get in the room. What kind of day are you having, my dear one? That was one way. If they got into the room and you could see that they were just gonna sulk the whole day and be sullen the whole day, my God, just leave the blessed kid alone. Every one of us has bad days. And I might sometime in the hour just go and put my hand on their desk and say, it's all right. It's all right. Or what do you need from me? What do you need from me? It was when the ones when they were wanted to hit every kid in the room. And then what does this look like? What does this sound like? What does this feel like? And then they were not going to. Then I had to learn how to say out, out. And I had a locker at both schools across from my room that had a number on it. And 1179 was mine at Creston, 2324 at the other school, 1179. And because there was a little bit of quirkiness or kind of humor in that, they would go out there. And then when we got him out in the hall, okay, darling, when have you like look at my hand, darling, when have you got that out of your system now?
So help me with this, David. You're saying out, but you're not necessarily kicking a student out. You're just saying this discussion needs to happen in the hallway because I don't want to do it in front of students.
It's correct.
Okay. Okay. Kevin, how about you? Some thoughts?
Yeah. Same thing. I mean, before we even get to the, I got to talk to you in the hallway for a minute, or can I talk to you in the hallway for a minute? Um, it's, oh, I didn't mean, I mean, like, well, okay, first of all, I learned how to say I'm sorry if I make mistakes. So that's a big thing that took me a long time to figure out, like 15 years maybe to figure out that I make mistakes too. Sit down with them. So your head is kind of level instead of me looming over because I'm a tallish
Mhm.
person. And so I try and do that. And then, just again, talk to them like a human being. If they're pissed, try some of those like you seem upset. And depending on their reaction to that, yeah, dumb, you're stupid, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, are you mad at me? Did I say something? Like, like and then do you want to go get a drink of water? Do you want to go to the bathroom? Do you want to go talk to your counselor? Is there sometimes it's the football coach, whatever it is. Um, Young men, sometimes they just got to take a lap, right? So you write them a pass to the drinking fountain and they walk it off. And they're not going to learn, nobody's going to learn anything. There's that escalation um, of aggressiveness. So if it's in the hallway, it's kind of a pattern of behavior. And I got to talk to you for a minute. We sit down because we have lounge furniture. Kind of in our building is
Right.
newer,
Right.
and so that's nice that I can actually sit down and we can have a conversation. But I can still kind of see in the window of my room, and they're all looking at us. But it's like I'm not yelling or screaming, but it's like, do I talk to you that way? Kind of like what David was saying is like, do I talk to you that way? Did I say that to you that way? What would your reaction be if I started talking to you in front of the entire class that way?
Hmm.
I mean, usually that gets them. So that's what I mean, as far as de-escalation goes, that's what I try and do.
Kevin, I'm glad you mentioned those areas in your school because I really like that. The hallway areas where you can go out and, you know, it isn't a situation where you have to take them out and read them the riot act most of the time. Most of the time, it's we need to come to an understanding of what's going on here. And so to have that where you can just sit on a bench or a couch and just kind of have a casual conversation about it, as opposed to sitting at a desk opposing each other
Mhm.
face to face, this is how things are going to be. That's something that can be even worse, right?
Yeah. I would like to piggyback on what David said about the saving face.
Yeah.
The idea that if you make an apology, you got to do it in front of everybody, right? Which
Mm.
is also not the easiest thing on my pride. But if I screwed up in front of everybody, I need to make the apology in front of everybody too. Be a public screw up. I screamed at that kid, or I said something maybe that I meant to be funny, but it wasn't taken that way. The
Right.
apology needs to be public as well. And that goes a long way. It's not only with that particular student, but with them all, because they see, oh, he's willing to make an apology for
Well,
everybody.
and the other thing too, Kevin, is they now know that this situation that used to be there between you and student is resolved, right?
Yeah.
Because often when a student comes back from a situation like that, the last the students saw of it was the power struggle. They saw the butting of the heads. They didn't see whatever redemptive policy you went through. They
Yeah.
didn't see how this student restored their place in class. So yeah, so there's that, right?
And th- and then I want to add this because in those first years I taught, because my first year was so awful. My first year was so awful because I did not know how to assert myself. I was not raised in a home. I didn't, and the school of education didn't teach me how to assert myself, and the students ran over my face. So then I thought from that second year to like the fifth or sixth year, um, God bless, I had better be on the offense. And what happened is then, you say, okay, when do you crush them and when do you nurture? Well, I thought, my goodness, I've got to build reputation in this building, and the best way to build reputation in this building with inner city students was to crush them. And then um, you see that had no bearing. And now when you look back on the history, those students I had in the 90s in those first years, they're not going to remember being kicked out in the hall. They're going to remember when we gave them hugs before they went home for Christmas. And what I realized is that to assert myself did not have to come with making them lose any of their dignity.
Yeah, David, I started out my teaching career. I was a football coach at the same time, and while teaching and coaching are complementary activities, you can't necessarily take your football coach persona into the classroom and your teaching persona onto the football field. And it took me a while to learn that too. The same responses, even within my players in the time that I coached, my players responded differently to that aggressive, my way or the highway, type of approach. So even my players changed their attitudes toward that. So I really needed to learn just how to approach my students in a way other than that domineering kind of way. And I think I think same as you, David. I think the students from early on in my career would think of me much differently than the students from my later part of my career, simply because of that. I mean, there were kids that I liked and kids that liked me and that sort of thing, but I'm just talking about how I treated students in front of other students, how I treated myself in front of in front of students and colleagues. I think that, it took a while for me to realize that, not everything was about me and not every behavior was because of me. And in some cases, I can't fix every problem. I can accommodate. I can ask the kid if they're okay. I can do a lot of the things that you talked about, David. Tap on their desk and ask if they're all right. Offer them a lap or a walk or a drink or a hug or whatever they need at that particular time. But when it really gets down to it, it's about maintaining the relationship with the student, right? And maintaining the public part of that relationship with the student, because if you have a conflict in public with the student, you should also make sure that resolution is made public also. Part of that too, I really became a fan of restorative practices and restorative justice in my time that I was in my later time in ninth grade, simply because those techniques seem to work best for my situation. I know some people aren't really real fond of it. It really takes a lot of a lot of administrative support, because if you don't have the backing from administration, that's going to be really tough to get that situation. But um, Kevin, what about when a student behaves out of class? How do they earn their way back in?
What you mean, like their behavior is so bad they can't be in my classroom anymore?
Correct. Yeah.
I I don't know that. I mean that what That's a hard question, Roy, because quite honestly, I don't know that a lot of that is up to me. I think mostly that's up to principal or an assistant principal
Good.
or dean. I don't. I usually that looks like an apology, I guess, right? It
Hmm.
depends what the kid did, but there's there's consequences. I mean, if you get in a fight, you get suspended.
Right.
If you're vaping, you get suspended for longer. If I mean, but if you call the teacher a bad word, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it hasn't happened in a while.
Right. And I guess that's
Depends on how you handle
I
that.
guess it's a weird question to ask when you started by saying that it doesn't happen very often in your class anymore. Yeah, I suppose there's non-negotiables, right? A kid uses a word they're not supposed to. A kid gets violently aggressive. Those are I mean non-negotiables. They have to leave. But are you kind of saying that you aren't really used to um, that anymore? I mean, do you have students that have? How many students have you had leave your room to go to the principal lately?
I mean, none. I mean, it's usually it usually goes with somebody you want to go talk to about this, right? Because clearly we're not communicating. And I'm not writing anybody up yet, right? Then depending on who they go to talk about it, right? So if they go to certain deans or a certain administrator, that person will write them up,
Right.
right? They go to a counselor or a social worker, then they can talk it out and it's resolved. And then when they come back, they almost always apologize of their own on their own. And I say,
Hmm.
hey, thanks for saying that. I really appreciate it. They don't have to make a public apology. Um, I'll say everybody has bad days. I totally all is forgiven usually, right? I mean, and it's been a long time since I had a kid swear at me. Although I will say, and I'm not proud of this, as a younger teacher, there were certain kids that I could ramp up enough to swear at me so I could kick them out of class, right? And write them up, and then they would be gone.
Hmm.
And that, back in the day, that was a couple days of in-house, and that's a couple days of I don't have to see you anymore, kind of thing. But that really doesn't solve anything. You know what I mean?
No,
It's
no.
like a short. It's like calling in sick. You know what I
It's
mean? It
yeah,
didn't
it's
really solve anything.
it's kicking the
It's
can
it's
down
a
the road.
it is right. It's a couple of days of, but it didn't help, right? And then everybody else in that room watched you. They know what you're doing, right? Watch you. I think did we call it rage baiting? Did we use that word?
I I I don't know if we'd use that
That
actual
word.
term, but I would use that term for it today.
Yeah, I mean, the students think they invented rage baiting. Dude, I was doing that in 2000,
Yeah.
and again, not proud of it. I mean, I haven't done it in a really long time. And but I haven't really anybody up in a really long time either. It doesn't really help, right? And
Right.
again, we all have bad days and we all have stuff going on in our lives. And so I guess if the original question is what do they got to do to come back? Usually it's we talk it out and it's an apology. Um, so right. But if it's like, I'm gonna kill you, Mr. Mulvihill, then that I shouldn't have to see that student. But if you're threatening lives, right? I mean, if I said that to a kid, I would lose my job. And I should.
Right. Right.
And if they say that to an adult, they should have the opportunity to work with somebody different.
Right.
You
Right.
know, so that's go ahead, David.
David, go ahead.
So, okay, so the first year I taught is just after the bell rings for the students who will get on the bus. And this boy stays after. So I'm standing there at the door to say goodbye to everyone. And he turns around and grabs me by my tie. And I'm 23 years old. And I had the wherewithal to keep my hands down at my sides and say, you have got to let go right now. And thank God that boy did. So that one we couldn't handle in the classroom. That one had to go with the principal. And the principal supported by, just as you're saying, that student was moved to another English 11 teacher in another English 11 classroom. And so, but those kinds of um, direct threats on who we are, those we're not going to go through this um, monkey business of like I'm trying to restore their dignity and that they're gone. And then like the last kid that told me to F myself, um, because he had not turned in an assignment. And then in front of the other 37 kids in the classroom says, F you, Mr. Lyons. He got up and ran out of the room, goes across the hall and says, you know how the students call me father. Goes and tells the teacher across the room, I just cursed father out. He's never going to forgive me.
Hmm.
So then what I would have wanted to do with him is for him and I to be able to talk in the hallway because we could have had this conversation. Okay, so in order for you to use that language, son, what is frustrating you? But then the principal gets involved with that. The principal sent that boy to in-house suspension for 1 hour.
1 hour.
1 hour. Then sends him back to me because I had him for AP and creative writing. So he comes back to me later in the afternoon.
Hmm.
And when he comes back later in the afternoon, even though it's a separate class, I said, son, are you ready to chat? He's still in a huff and a puff. We know he feels bad from what the teacher across the hall said to me. Okay. I said, well, then you're going to have to go sit somewhere else. Well, the trouble is, I would have wanted the principal to say, let's have Mr. Lyons and that boy and me sit down and do a restorative circle because we could have solved that in an instant. But instead, because of the choice that the dean made or the assistant principal made, then there's still friction between us. When he came back the next day, is when I said, "Okay, son, when I'm staying there greeting him, okay, son, we're gonna chat right now, and we have it resolved in a minute."
Yeah, and that's the thing too. It's like involving a third party means you lose control over how this process goes too. And Kevin, you kind of mentioned that too. I've had some people talk about, sending a student out and they come back half hour later with a lollipop and a smile on their face. Sometimes that's counteractive to what you want to have happen. So, you release that control when a student leaves your classroom. It's kind of out of your hands as far as how they come back and the conditions upon which they come back. Hey guys, my alarm just went off, which means Kevin, you got a class that's starting in a second, and I got to run off to class. Um, One of the things that I found that helps with these things is building student relationships. So how about to close today? Something we can do on Monday. Um, what do you do to build relationships with students? David, how about you? One true and tested thing you do to build relationships with students.
Greet them at the door by name.
You don't have any fancy handshake or anything, do you?
Oh, you would think I'd have a high five or something. No, it's just that.
Good. All right. Kevin, how about you?
Exactly the same. Greet them at the door, right? I don't always use their names, but I try to. I do like, David, you mentioned in passing, when it's time to leave, say goodbye at the door. I think I'm gonna try that on Monday. Usually it's just me, get ready for the next class. Okay, bye. See ya. Have a great day. I think the individual, hey, have a good one. At the door might be the way to go. I'm gonna try it.
Yeah, I like that idea. The one that I was going to mention is having conversations with students about anything except for school. They have lives outside of the classroom, and they deserve to know that you know about their lives outside of the classroom. You don't necessarily have to stalk them. You don't necessarily have to do anything like that. But, having a situation where you can do that, when you can uh, Yeah. So building relationships with students. Okay. We're going to run. Thank you for your time, guys. I had fun. Did you?
It was
Always.
great.
Awesome. Great. For some reason, it looks like my camera froze, but you can still hear me. Yeah.
Yep, you're coming in
Just
loud and
fine.
clear.
Okay, so I'm not sure why that happened, but oh, there we go. There I am back again. Um, so we don't have to have that replacement picture over my face like you had to deal with last time, Kevin. It's good to see your face this time. Let's plan on doing this again real soon. We'll check calendars and get back with each other. But thanks again. This has been English Teacher Island. Office hours are now closed, and I'll see you guys soon.